You know, there is so many really cool skills here that make fantastic, fun builds. Why are so many of them pathetic? Hello, my fellow sorcerers! How are you all doing this fine day? We are a good month and a bit into the season at this point, and we have had our big fixing patch to Sorcerer to, well, you know, make our aspects and paragon nodes actually work as it should, so that's cool. It's a sad day where it feels like, oh wow, we got a buff, when actually what happens is we just got made, you know, functional as written on the tooltips, but overall that still puts us in a really sad, weak place. Oh, and if you are wondering, in the background, I've been messing around with ice shards, trying to make it work this season, and there's certainly potential there, and I'll just let you watch a bit of this test, early, easy, tier 70 that I was doing to see where my build was currently at. And it's a difficult thing to actually sort of get your head round and accept, because the highest pit clear, not done by a group or with holy bolts, is Sorcerer, doing our infinite, immortal flame shield. I'm going to call it bullshit, because look, let's be honest, it's not a fun way for a class to have power. The literal I am forever in my flame shield has a certain appeal, even though it means you essentially just don't interact with the game's mechanics, but when the game's mechanics are, let's be honest, bullshit echo screen effect one-shots that are just unreasonable to avoid forever perfectly in a 6-minute long boss fight, it kinda gets a little bit more of a pass. Though that said, they are toning down the pits, and they will be rebalanced. In fact, the patch to do so will have happened by the time you hear this, so that's all well and good. But the point remains that there is a certain sort of anti-funness to doing this infinite flame shield way forward that I hope isn't going to be the way forward forever for Sorcerer. Because look, you take away infinite flame shield and suddenly we drop down to either the worst or the 4th worst class, fighting over that, you know, not completely awful spot with Druid, while the other 3 classes get to do what they do without needing to farm for 8 trillion hours to get literally perfect gear to do one specific saving grace that enables the class to just function at a high level. But I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. What I wanted to do was actually sit down and talk the state of Sorcerer in general, especially with the Vessel of Hatred reveals and the release date for the expansion. The expansion is really where we can see meaningful changes to Sorcerer and, in fact, and classes in general on a level that isn't just tweaking numbers. So really, what's actually going on then? Well, it's easy to say, and not inaccurate to say, that just at a baseline, our abilities either do way too little damage, or Rogue, Barbarian, and Necromancer abilities just do way too much damage. Whichever way you want to look at it or think it is, the point is the discrepancy is way, way too high. As I say, if we weren't able to go immortal, we would be stuck probably hard capped at about 115 in the pit, maybe 120. That's kind of the peak, doing things, you know, normally, playing the game normally, which is a sad state of affairs, but not as sad as, well, what has happened with Sorcerer and how its meta has developed. And that is said infinite flame shieldness. Now, don't get me wrong, the rest of the game, Nightmare dungeons all the way up to tier 100, helltide, farming your unique bosses, even the torment versions, I love Sorcerer in, I really do. There's build variety, there's fun to be had, you can do some really cool nifty things, you can do some really unique things. My teleport, stomp, explosion only move via teleporting, it's my pride and joy this season. I love this build, but it breaks my heart that it can't ever really go past about pit 100 to 105, and even then that needs perfect 12 out of 12 masterworked gear to pull off, and that really is a shame. But creativity-wise, yeah, that is glorious, and it is glorious in every other kind of content I just mentioned. But I think it is fair to say that we can't just ignore the actual difficult endgame and go, oh well, that's not Sorceress's thing, that's fine, especially when that endgame is primarily getting through massive health bosses, of which that is Sorcerer's weakness. It didn't used to be, but it is now. We will get back to that, but I just really want to stress this flame shield thing, because for one season, this season, the new changes, tempering, the gear rework, and how it's all happened, having it for one season is fine. It's teething issues. But if this is just how it is for Sorcerer, from now, forever, every season pushing the pit like this, doing this, it's going to get incredibly both boring and, more importantly, depressing very, very quickly. Let's go into this in detail then. In order then to have infinite flame shield, which I still don't quite have, and I play this game for a job, so think about that. Like 99% of Sorcerer players will never have infinite flame shield because it requires absurd luck and time investment. You need to have as many ranks in flame shield as possible, which obviously means you then need to have yourself Harlequin's Crest, you ideally need a greater affix roll on a chest, and it also means that 5 of your skill points are locked up into maxing flame shield. You need to then get as much cooldown reduction, and by as much, I mean nearly the maximum amount. 32% is just, fine. It's solid for general activities, but for this, it's pathetic. You need to have a greater affix cooldown reduction roll on your focus, a greater affix cooldown reduction roll on your necklace. You need to have, ideally, your Harlequins keep hitting the cooldown reduction on the masterwork. You need to have all of that, farm all of that, masterwork it, have it hit the cooldown reduction. Hell, I had it hit twice on Telrash's, which is ridiculously lucky, but it wasn't a maximum roll anyway, so I still technically need to farm a better one, until you get to the point that this says 60+%, which is a real bastard to attain. That's a lot of greater affix gear you need to find with cooldown reduction, which is already a rare affix, and you need to pray that you don't brick it because you need to pull off the tempers. You need this flame shield duration temper. I got a minimum roll here, thankfully, finally, on my last attempt, and I would have cried if I'd bricked this otherwise really lucky piece of armor, but it's still missing a good old 6% of flame shield duration. And then you have this on your legs and your necklace. Like, you need to farm an uber unique. You need to get 3 tempers on 3 different pieces of gear, legs, chest, and neck, and they all need to roll up towards the maximum percent. You need to get at least 3 greater affix cooldown reduction pieces of gear that all then hit masterworking at least once, ideally twice, and the point I'm making is that is absurd and should not be required for anyone to feel competitive in pushing the endgame content. It's objectively cool we can do it, but if every season is, I have to farm my Exodia level infinite flame shield gear so I can actually compete with the Barbarians in the pit this season, it's going to be real bad. And it is. It really is this dichotomy of the actual end result. Yeah, that's fun, that's neat, it's a gimmick, but getting there for anyone that cares to, it is a mountain to climb. I really hope that next season, in Vessel, in general, Infinite Flame Shield is made impossible, so we don't have this to grind for, because you can't ignore it if you want to be competitive. I have been trying, and instead we actually get both the damage and, yes, survivability buffs that we really need as a sorcerer. So that is one of the main issues that has developed now, thanks to this season and how Sorcerer has been dealing with it. But what actually can we do to address it? Well, talking of the boss damage, to get back to that, Sorcerer used to be pretty good at boss damage because of stagger. When a boss is staggered, it counts as, well, everything, every kind of CC. So we had, like, aspect of control, which used to be one of our just best aspects. We would put it on absolutely everything, getting this 35% multiplicative. We would get it 3 times over on bosses as they were immobilized, stunned, and frozen. It got nerfed to just be 1. And the thing is, you could only stagger a boss reasonably 4 4 times, which is way more than you need on most bosses, but in the pit, that's nothing. And that's because the threshold to stagger goes up and up and up the more you stagger them. The first 3 are pretty quick, then the 4th one takes, well, 90% less stagger to actually stagger. You only deal 10% stagger damage to it, which is insane, and then after that you are out of luck. So Sorcerer used to be the king of nuking down bosses in a stagger because Sorcerer is all about CCing enemies and doing more damage to them while they're CC'd, which works great for trash clearing. We're arguably the best trash clearer in the game. Not by a huge margin, but at least it is a strength. But on bosses with massive amounts of health that you're fighting for 5 minutes plus, yeah, that is a really big issue. So having control work like it used to be, or making it so that we can stagger bosses at least reliably, repeatedly, is a huge step. And then I really do think we need to look at enchantment slots. I know I keep bringing this up, but having the 3rd one back would change so much, make such a huge difference, because burning is so important and essentially locks one up, so actually having 2 more to play around with to do fun combos would be great. Like imagine having automatic chain lightning firing out, creating, let's say, crackling energy, and then having the lightning spear enchant, so picking up that crackling energy summons lightning spears. That's a really fun combo, and you could apply that to a non-lightning build. But then we lose Ice Blades enchant, and then we lose Firebolt enchant. And oh, let me back that up a second. Ice Blades enchant. Yeah, that whole little facet of Infinite Flame Shield that I left omitted. That changes everything, because you know what that's made happen? Well, we have to have now Ice Blades enchant, because we need to have the Ice Blade cooldown reduction helping out with our Infinite Flame Shield, so that's just locked in on nearly every build, as is needing burning on nearly every build. Oh look, we need Ice Blades and Firebolt on nearly every build. That's 2 enchantment slots, the rest of them might as well not exist. That is not a healthy state for a class to be in. And because we need Ice Blades enchant for the cooldown reduction, and because Conjurations take your stats now, we also now essentially in every single thing that we do need to have ourselves Ancient Flame for the 50% attack speed, so it transfers to your Ice Blades, which then also means that on our skill tree we have to, yes, take the Ice Blades down to summoned, but we also have to take Essus Ferocity. We also can't ignore how strong Conjuration Mastery buffed is on top of having to need Ice Blades, so every build needs to have this Ice Blade spam built into it, Conjurations built into it, which is neat, of course, but it's very ubiquitous no matter what core skill you're actually playing. Your bars will essentially look like how I have them, but with perhaps actually Lightning Spear swapped in instead of Unstable Currents, but even then, the fact that we are viably running Unstable Currents, not in a shock build, just for the 25% attack speed while it's up to make Ice Blades hit 25% faster to put more cooldown on Flame Shield, it's very exhausting, repetitive, and it's going to get very dull very quick if this is just the Sorcerer way from now on, thanks to the new gear system. In any case, this is generically going to be your bars with the 1 damaging move replaced with Ball Lightning, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Incinerate, etc., and everything else is just homogeneous. We need to have Ice Armor, Teleport, and Flame Shield to not die because we just fall over otherwise, and even then we still fall over. There is way too much of the Sorcerer that's locked in no matter what build you're doing, because we just need this kind of baselineness to work, to function, to be okay. So, freeing up the need for this Conjuration, Infusion, and Burning Synergy, and an extra enchantment slot without nerfing them. Don't nerf them so they're not worth using, so we have to use other things. Just give us a way to actually have our cake and eat it a little bit, because whether we have our cake or eat it, we're still there watching the Barbarians, the Necromancers, and the Rogues have 5 times as much cake. And that just doesn't seem fair on a cake level. In any case, yeah, that is definitely something that needs looking at, and just the raw power of the enchantments too. I mean, why is it 10%? 10% to get a Lightning Spear out absorbing a crackling energy? That's so pathetic. Like, this should be at least 25. You know, make it fun. Let you do proper lightning spear swarms to actually play into that as a build. That would be cool. Why do we need to have a longer evade cooldown just for having teleport? Just let us have it. Let it be an upgrade. Why is the Incinerate only up for 8 out of 14 seconds? That's just nothing nearly half the time. If the Incinerate enchantment was just, we get an extra serpent incinerating when we do, that would be so cool. Like, there's just so much here that is just way weaker than it needs to be. When you stun an enemy, there's only a 40% chance for them to do it. Charge bolts is so weak. This could be 100% and it still wouldn't get run. There really is a need to look at this. Like, if this enchantment was just, you always had a blizzard above you, oh, that would be so much fun. You could make a build around that. That's so interesting, but less than half the time? What's the point? And then it's like, oh, don't worry, we've got ourselves a paragon to affect it. Yeah, we get 20% stronger enchantments. Seriously? You know how many points we need to waste to slowly go up here, going past nothing useful for this legendary node? This legendary node should be located, like, here, halfway up. And then maybe it's worth grabbing for the little boost, but this should be stronger. There's so many nodes that should be stronger. This here, with Static Surge, Chain Lightning, Charge Bolts, this used to be really cool, because it used to actually work with enchantments. Enchantments used to proc things. When you had this going on, we could put ourselves Chain Lightning, cast a different spell, it would automatically fire out Chain Lightning, and then the Chain Lightning would make enemies vulnerable, and it would give us mana. Oh, yeah, that was excellent. Why did that get nerfed? It's not too strong, it's just less fun now. Hell, even the frozen orbs that get launched from your enchantment don't actually proc Winterglass. They don't count. They can't make conjurations appear. Why? Make it so that anything cast via an enchantment counts as if you yourself, the sorcerer, had cast it. Because you are still casting it, it's still you, it's still your enchantment. That would open up so many more interactions that would really work out. And even then, when we look at other nodes, like, this has the potential to be great, but Crackling Energy is so weak that even a 213% multiplicative is still pathetic. And then we have stuff like Elemental Summoner, which again, it's just really weak numerically. Things like Burning Instinct is nice because it scales forever and it actually let Incinerate work, but it's really our only infinite scaler. The other classes have so many infinite scalers. Like, Searing Heat should be able to go way higher than 30%. Why not? Let us pump these numbers and actually reach the heights of other classes. There's just a lot of inherent mechanical issues that things just don't work how they intuitively should as the sorcerer, and that is really upsetting. So that's kind of where I'm at for me. What we really need is, I think survivability-wise, is about fine if you actually can afford some room for health affixes, our barriers, our cooldown reduction. We can do quite well at tankiness and dodginess. But that's only because if we get a damage buff, we don't have to have every affix damage related and can afford to have some health and so on. But mainly, let us do premium damage against staggered bosses again. Let us have a third enchantment slot. The enchantment should be stronger. Stuff cast by our enchantment should count as the sorcerer casts it, and we need a much higher cap or uncapped legendary paragon nodes if we're going to make this happen, alongside making infinite flame shield not possible, but in return getting a substantial buff across the board so we can compete, you know, normally without having to farm perfect Exodia level gear, which 99% of the player base is never going to do, and therefore 99% of the player base is never going to take their sorcerer above like a tier 100, which is really sad. I still think it's my favorite class. It's still by far and away my favorite class to play in every other content, but I just had to make this video because I'm sat here theory crafting builds to show you guys, coming up with a new way to play Ice Shards that was using life on hit and temerity, and it was really cool actually, but then you take it to the pit and it's like, well, this is pointless. I shouldn't have tried to have fun. I just need to be playing Immortal Flame Shield, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, or, you know, the actual Firewall Firebolt. And the fact that of the matter that I'm sat here like, well, no matter what build I come up with to present to you guys, I need to have all of the perfect Flame Shield Forever gear, otherwise it's not a, actual viable build in the endgame content. It kind of just crushed me a little bit, and I wanted to get this across. So, with that all said, let me know your thoughts as sorcerers. Even with all of our vulnerable damage fixed and such, there's still a few little just key base concepts that need addressing to really let us experiment more, raise our damage ceiling, and free us from this pigeonhole. We have never been more pigeonholed. Burning Synergy, Ice Blades, Flame Shield gear on every build forever if nothing changes. That's not good. Like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.